Well, good morning, folks. It's a gray, rainy, kind of just barely above freezing, cool morning here in New England. If you caught my last episode about winterizing the diesel, I will have tipped my hand that I have pulled into the dock and connected to the grid for the winter. So my cruising season for this particular winter is over. We'll now enjoy some of the benefits and delights and advantages of being connected to grid power for, well, a few months anyway. We'll see how it goes. March can go either way around here, but certainly for January and February we'll be plugged in, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. I want to showcase a few of the things that I've done over the years to modify Charis. A lot of it's just plug-in, easy stuff, to essentially make her a comfortable home in this micro dock-o-minium mode of mine. Starting back aft is where the show begins, with two separate 30 amp shore power plugs, two separate services on the boat. It's what I consider a split bus system, where there are two 30 amp cords coming in and two entirely separated systems. The primary one on this panel back aft, monitored by these meters, amperage and voltage, and that's the main system of the boat that controls outlets, water heater, and the battery charger. The second system is connected to a pretty much identical panel that's up in the forward cabin, and the second system has its only job as operating two of these thermostatically controlled single 120 volt outlets. This one is now used in sort of a permanent on position, as the main cabin ceramic heater has become a more sophisticated thermostat unit, and it does a very good job of maintaining temperatures. These modern heaters have a cool down mode that extends their life pretty good, so letting the heater modulate the temperature and the on-off is a better way to do it. So these little plug-in ceramic heaters, of course, are not designed to be a primary heating source. They're designed for auxiliary room heating, and as with everything I show you, I'll throw in the caveat that well, we each sail our own ship. Don't try this at home. But my tendency is to have more of these running at lower settings. So this one, for example, is rated at 1500 watts and typically runs at low power, so half of that wattage, and does a fine job for the space until it gets down below zero. Once you get down around freezing, you're going to need to switch this guy to high power, and it does just fine. These smaller units, as you see, this one back aft is mounted in a metal case that I built for it, and that's to allow some toe space underneath, so I'm not kicking it while I'm working in the galley. Those are smaller units. Those are, I think, 1200 watts. But again, for all of these little ceramic heaters, if you're running it at half power, that heater is going to last for years and years. I want to point out one other thing that you should look for if you're using these, and that is that on the back you'll see that there is a screen, a dust screen basically. So with all of these, you have got to keep them clean, and probably the reason they get such a bad rep for being used as a heat source is that people just let them get full of dust. The dust causes resistance, builds up heat, and can eventually cause a fire. So if you've got these, you need to be taking the vacuum cleaner to them once a week or so, you need to take them out with a leaf blower or an air compressor and blow all the dust out of those fins frequently. And the other thing I'll say is that they're inexpensive. So at the first whiff of an odor that doesn't smell right, or the first sound that the fan's not running right, throw it out and go buy a new one. And then up in the forward cabin, this white box is a baseboard heater line voltage thermostat, which has installed in the bottom of it a single 110 outlet. And this is essentially a way of controlling the heater and using an external thermostat on this particular heater. And it's actually cycling this small heater. This one is cycled on and off by the outlet. That second 30 amp shore power service has only 2 outlets to control, and those 2 outlets are for the main backbone electric heating. So we don't rely on the primary AC boat service for the bulk of the electric heating duty, but it actually does a fair amount of low wattage auxiliary heating because it has the capacity. As you can see right now, I'm operating it well, such little amperage incoming that it doesn't even register, probably about an amp or 2. The other panel has meters as well, but I would say the other one is probably running at a fairly low amperage as well. If you watched my video about the Wallace central heater, you'll know how enamored I am of toasty toes, and to that end, I found a really cool product. Which essentially is a carpet underlayment, again, low wattage radiant heater. This one is rated at 65 watts, and it's producing just enough heat that you can feel the warmth, but not enough that it's going to overheat or get anything dangerously hot. You can always put your hand on this without any danger, and this is actually designed for this purpose, to be installed underneath a small scatter rug, and so it works really well. That typically I just let that stay on, and that is creating a base level radiant floor heat. Aft here in the galley food prep area, underneath this little scatter rug, there's another style of heat mat. This is a Cozy Products heat mat. Again, this is essentially a rubber mat with a very low wattage resistance heating coil run through it, so it effectively produces radiant floor heat at a very low wattage on a plug-in basis. And these, both this one and the one in the forward cabin, are normally off. They're just switched on when a little extra heat convenience might be desired. And up here in the forward cabin, aside from the small sort of half-size ceramic heater that's running on the thermostat, underneath the rug I have another one of these Cozy Products radiant floor mats, and that one, along with the one that's underneath the shower pan floor, are run through this programmable timer. Again, the wattage on these is so low that it's basically the equivalent to an old school non-LED light bulb. So a lamp timer is not even close to its rated power to run the 2 of these. And the nice thing about this timer is it has multiple programming modes. So for example, I can, as I have it now, set it to just warm up that mat for about a half hour before I go to bed and about a half hour before I wake up, and the The result is that that massive rubber gets nice and warm, and you put your feet down and have a radiant floor heat for just that brief period of time when you're going to be stomping around barefoot. So works quite well. I'm a big fan, and again, just, you know, one of the things that makes Charis less of a compromise as my home. So moving now into the head, what we have here is the shower pan, the shower floor, and underneath the cover to the shower floor, so it comes up when you lift the cover to use the shower, this is actually a medical heat pad that you'd use for a painful lower back or something. So again, very low level of heat. It's not going to burn anything. I think this is rated 50 watts. And the idea here is that before you get in the shower, you simply turn this on for a few minutes, and it warms up the shower floor, so you're not putting your feet onto a cold shower floor as you step in. Here's what that shower floor heat pad looks like in its native element, along with all sorts of warnings saying not to use it the way I'm using it, of course. This is one that I actually use for its intended purpose, but it's basically a 50 watt, very low heat element. Okay, so we are now looking in the engine compartment, and back in that corner, kind of hard to see, but that's the water heater. That's running on 120 volts. It has a 500 watt heating element, electric heating element, so when we're plugged into shore power, that basically is maintained at temperature. Very important that that never get below freezing, because if it does, the engine has to come out to replace it. So one of the things that dictate when I come in and plug into the grid is when I get to the point where I can no longer trust that that water heater will not freeze. So speaking of things freezing and the relative disaster that would be, this is looking down into the bilge at the freshwater pump and a lot of the freshwater hoses and pipes. What you see there is an old school incandescent 100 watt light bulb, and again, any of this equipment that freezes causes major problems and expense. So we monitor the temperature down here, and when it gets to the point where it looks like the bilge may drop below freezing, then it's time to come in and plug in and just let this light bulb just create enough heat to maintain the temperature above 32 Fahrenheit. Up here in this corner, essentially this is just an air cleaner. It's an air purifier. It's got a charcoal filter, supposed to filter out allergens. Really what this thing does is it just keeps an airflow moving and sucks a lot of dust out of the cabin. It's amazing how dusty a small 700 cubic foot space can get. So I leave this on. Some might be a little put off by the white noise, but to be honest with you, there's a busy road not far ahead of my slip here, and this white noise kind of masks it a little bit. One of the grid-connected pleasures that I prize the most is this simple little, I think it's about 140 watt slow cooker. I was reading an article just last week about how people would generally be healthier if they discovered the joys of slow cooking instead of fast food takeout, given that a lot of people just don't really have time to come home and spend hours preparing an elaborate meal. The thing about a slow cooker is, and sadly I can't share this with you because no genius has yet invented smell-o-vision. I rank that up there in disappointment with the fact that we're not yet driving flying cars that fold up into a briefcase, but I digress. Anyway, you come home and you're just immediately greeted with this aromatherapy of something really good that took you all about 10 minutes to toss in the pot before you left in the morning, and come home and it's ready to go. Again, another small on-grid shore power connected pleasure that I enjoy for a few months. Now if I could just get someone to show up and put away the breakfast dishes while I was away. So the primary power on the boat is 12 volt DC, but you've got to get that from somewhere. And one of the things that will happen when I come to the dock and plug into the grid in the winter is that I can no longer use my solar panels right into the sun there, a lousy picture. Solar panels would normally be mounted on two wing brackets off the stern. Far too vulnerable to damage. I just wouldn't fit in the slip, and they'd get destroyed. So when you're plugged in, you're using a battery charger. This Victron that I put in last year has been fantastic. It's got an app that you can monitor on your phone if you're into that, but it has a tremendous amount of controllability. And so in the winter, plugged in on-grid mode for those few months, you essentially stop doing that mental arithmetic of keeping track of how many amps you've created or how many do you have to create to break even. This little guy here just keeps you running, keeps the lights on. And what that means is the trade-offs go away. For example, in the fall, very often when I'm consuming more battery power to run the diesel heaters, I've got to turn off my little Amazon chest freezer here. But when I'm plugged into the dock, that concern goes away, and I've essentially got enough energy that I can run the chest freezer and the refrigeration full time. So the two things that affect the amount of energy it takes to heat a space, aside from the temperature differential, the temperature outside versus inside, probably the most important single thing is the insulation level, the R value of your insulation. Now in Charis, much of the hull is insulated, so in the V-berth here behind this wood ceiling there's styrofoam insulation. Up on the bookshelf, it's probably impossible to see in this photo, but there's more styrofoam insulation, which is essentially wrapped in plastic barrier. The forward hatch has an isinglass Velcro cover that goes in place of the screen that would be on there in the summer, and that creates a dead air space between the fiberglass single layer hatch in the cabin. Again, not as good as a vacuum space, but by creating a non-moving airspace between the isinglass and the hatch, it actually is a pretty effective insulation. And then, of course, most of the cabin is in effect double-walled by virtue of lockers, hanging lockers, storage lockers. There's very little space in Charis's cabin where the outside skin, single skin fiberglass hull is exposed to the inside of the boat. So yeah, inside of these cabinets it does get quite chilly, but again, by walling that off and having a separate isolated space, you're essentially creating a bit of a dead air zone that gives you some insulation. So I think the main point with all of these little comforts and conveniences that I enjoy on grid is that it's a very much dual mode life here on Charis. And one thing you'll notice about almost all of these conveniences is that they're plug and play. So I actually have a large duffel bag that's my seasonal switch bag, and when I come on the dock, that bag comes on board, and out come the electric appliances that plug in and only work when there is 24/7 available power. And then into that bag go all the things that I don't need once I've decommissioned for the season. And so having the ability to swap this gear on and off is crucial. Put it into storage when otherwise it would be taking up a lot of space on the boat. The second thing, as I mentioned with the shore power setup, is you don't want to overload your shore power service. The closer you run any electrical service to its rating, the greater becomes the possibility of having a problem, particularly due to age. Wire gets old, connections get crusty, a little bit of resistance in a connection that would not be a problem if you were pulling half of its rating through the connection can become a very real problem if you're running at full rating. So I'm not advocating having poorly maintained electrical, but I definitely don't advocate running a 30 amp service at close to 30 amps most of the time. One of the things that we talk about when we're doing electrical system layout and design is connected load percentage. And you can very quickly take an electrical service and connect many times its rated load to it. In other words, if you have a 30 amp service and two 15 amp outlets, you're at 100% connected load. But there is no 30 amp panel that you're going to buy that has only two breakers. They all have 4 or 6 or more. So it becomes a job for the operator to balance those loads and to say, well, I'm just not going to turn everything on at the same time and rely on the breaker, the 30 amp main breaker, to trip. Not only do you not want that to happen in the middle of the night when it's 10 degrees out, but you're now relying on your system to protect you rather than using the system in a safe manner. So by having a split bus system, it does not mean that I'm consuming 60 amps of electricity. That's something that I suppose would be possible, but entirely unnecessary for the amount of volume that I'm heating. What it means is that I'm running two 30 amp systems at a fraction of their rating, and that is a much safer thing to do than running one system at capacity or even beyond. As far as what the total energy usage of all of these components are, I don't really have a number because I'm in a marina that essentially it's a flat rate, including power for the slip rental. So I don't know how much power I'm consuming based on a meter, but what I can say is that based on the very small volume of Charis's cabin, that being about 700 cubic feet, based on my experience with the toolbox diesel air heater, that being 2 kilowatts, I would say that a 2 kilowatt constant power availability is adequate for the size of this cabin, because it certainly worked fine off-grid. That toolbox heater, there were nights that were down to 14 degrees and it kept the cabin at a comfortable temperature. So for my own particular volume and insulation level, that's probably not a bad number to look at. The main difference with the electrical setup is the distribution. Rather than having one large 2 kilowatt source blowing hot air into the cabin, I now have multiple small low wattage appliances distributed throughout. So it's a more evenly distributed heat. It's a heat that essentially is maintaining rather than raising and lowering temperature, and that carries an efficiency all by itself. So I think that the biggest difference between the diesel forced hot air heaters and the electric is the ability to pinpoint place the heat where you want it, when you want it. Case in point being these radiant floor mats. By and large, only one of them stays on in the main cabin, and it's working in conjunction with the main ceramic heater. The forward cabin shower and galley mats are used only for a very short period of time intermittently when that's where you want the heat. So if you think about it, it's a little bit like light. Heat and light have in common that the more fixtures you have, the more appliances you have, the better you can place the energy usage, and in the end, the less energy you will use. Because if you put just enough light where you're working, you're being far more efficient than if you light up an entire area with larger amounts. And it kind of works the same way with heat when you get right down to it. And finally, just kind of wrapping up where we started, one of the greatest blessings of being tied up in a slip, though I've had to give up my my moat and my isolated dacha lifestyle of being off-grid, one of the greatest things is that I am not facing the commute from the mooring to the dock that I talked about a little bit in that particular video. So on a rainy, slushy, snowy morning like this, rather than bundling up and getting in the dinghy and coming into the dock, today's not blowing hard anyway, essentially I'm just going to step onto the dock, and I've got about a 200-yard commute to get ashore. And that's pretty nice for the coldest, sloppiest few months of the year. So anyway, that's a little bit about my dock-o-minium mode lifestyle, some of the hacks and gadgets and gizmos that essentially make it comfortable and pleasant, and anything but the compromise that people tend to envision when they find out you live on your boat in the winter in New England. It's actually a pretty nice life. So thanks for coming aboard this morning. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and a share, and maybe subscribe and tell your friends. We'll see you next week.